Okay, this is the Affordable Housing Committee meeting of February 9th, 2022. We're meeting via Zoom. Mark Barnhart, Director of Community Economic Development for the town of Fairfield, and we're joined by members of the Affordable Housing Committee. We have Steve and Janice and Nina and Carrie and Heather and Gwen. And we also have members of the public, Bob, Herb, and Jackie. We all have our recording secretary, Gretchen Gerthner, and our consultant, Glenn Chauder from Planometrics. So with that, I will turn things over to you, Steve, for your welcome, and we'll go forward with you.
Thank you. So first, it's good to see all of you, especially Nina and Janice. Now we can see you, actually. That's good.
Yeah, that helps.
So I think, let's see, Bob and Herb, and you said Glenn, did you not, Mark? And so
I did.
Most of this evening is sort of the Glenn show, as it has been for the last couple of meetings. And I think we should first get the minutes approved. We have two session minutes from January 12th meeting and then the January 26th meeting. Can I get I believe that Robert's Rules of Order is we get a motion, we get it seconded, and then we have discussion. So if I could get a motion.
Can we do a separate motion or combined or what?
I think combined.
Okay, I move that we approve the minutes of January 12th and of February 9th.
No.
January 26th.
January 12th and January 26th.
We had two meetings in January.
Okay, right,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, I see.
Okay. And the second was
Somebody?
that Janice? Did
Okay,
Janice?
I'll second.
Yeah,
I
okay.
second that we approve the minutes.
Yeah, thank you. So with that, any discussion, comments, typos, changes?
No, I think Gretchen takes great minutes, really.
Well, I do too.
Yeah.
I do. Well, then hearing none, no discussion, no corrections. All in favor of approving the minutes, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously. Great. Okay, so before we turn it over back to Mark and then to Glenn, I just wanted to say, because of the format, as with prior meetings, only the members of the committee can really contribute. If possible, if we have time, or if the format allows, if people who are not on the committee have a question or a comment and they'd like to be recognized, raise your hand, either electronically or physically, and we'll try to acknowledge you. But again, the committee members come first. So with that, Mark, I would turn it back to you and Glenn to see how we want to deal with the executive summary and the report itself.
Yeah, I think for this evening, I'll turn things over to Glenn. I did give you, Glenn, you should be able to share your screen, but I think we want to focus initially on the executive summary, specifically the strategies. In the executive summary, that's a fairly easy 4-page document that we can take a look at. And I think the strategies are on the next couple pages, or third page, second page, I think. But my thought would be that, if we can develop some consensus around the strategies as well as, the prioritization of them, that would be helpful. And then I think the other question we had in my conversation with Glenn leading up to the meeting is whether or not there had been some conversation with the committee about numerical goals associated with each of them. And I know there has been some further conversation about whether that's appropriate or not. So again, that would be helpful to get some clarification on that. So with that, I'll turn things over to Glenn and let him run through the executive summary, and then we can go into the other report if we feel we have time. Glenn?
Thank you very much, Mark. Hi, everybody. So based on our last meeting, took the executive summary, which had been 8 pages, and brought it down to 4 pages. The front page is just sort of an introduction to what it is that we're working on and our overall goal statement. Then pages 2 and 3 are a summary of housing strategies, and then graphics that explain sort of the missing middle housing concept, and then some housing options, which might occur through some of our strategies. And then the 4th page is an overview of what affordable housing means and you know, what the numbers sort of work out to be. So I think that most people can get answers quickly from the executive summary. What is this all about? What are our priorities and strategies, and what does affordable housing mean? So I think I found it very helpful in our last meeting that we talked through the priorities in terms of what I categorized as tier 1 and tier 2 strategies, and then other strategies. I think it made the plan much more focused. I think I was generally consistent with the priorities that the committee had established. I think there were a couple in tier 2 that I wasn't quite sure what to do with them, so I slotted them in here, figuring that we could move them around. So with that, what are your thoughts or reactions to the executive summary?
Well, Glenn, let me first say that Bob Ellwanger had done a nice redraft. I think I forwarded to you, which doesn't have the colors and the pictures and stuff. And I will say that I like Bob's formatting better, but the formatting is not as important as the content. And so going back, I agree that we should look at the strategies and
Can you just make a note too, Steve? I don't recall getting that from you, from what that document was. So it's either during or after the meeting. If you could send that to me, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, I sent it just before the meeting again, so you might check.
Yeah. Okay, keep going.
Yeah, so
And I think the crux of that was that there was a little bit more elaboration on the strategies and specificity, and also some suggestion of numerical goals. I think that was your contribution, Steve.
Yeah.
But I don't think they're materially different than those that are presented here in this executive summary. My initial reflection on this was, I think, you know, the strategies to me, to my way of thinking, are the most important element of the plan. And perhaps instead of having illustrations on page 3 that are not really in context, we could spread out the strategies and either illustrate them as appropriate with some illustrations or images if we felt they were appropriate, but also maybe, as Bob had suggested in his comments, provide a little bit more detail in terms of the strategy itself, so people have a better understanding. It's not, you know, it's in some respects, the strategies as outlined here are a little bit vague. So I think that was the thrust of what Bob was presenting in his redraft.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. Good.
and Mark, before we talk about the strategies, maybe we should go back a page, Glenn, and make sure that there's an agreement on the goal.
Could we, yeah, that would be helpful, Glenn, to blow it up a little bit more.
Let me see.
I think I can bring up Bob's document on my screen. Can I put them side by side? I might be able to. You want me to try that? No, I don't know how to
Do that. Yeah.
Well, now you promised to do that.
Well, no, I think the challenge is I don't know if you can share 2 screens at the same time.
Yeah,
Oh,
well,
It's gonna be tricky.
So while we're waiting to see if we're able to share two screens at the same time, if I can just say that based on what I had heard the last meeting that we were here, we're asking for less pages, have it be more condensed, make sure that, we just did brief bullet points on what the strategies were. I think that if that was the goal, that is what is achieved here, as opposed to making sure that everything was detailed so they could then reference back to the other document, right? So this is just a brief overview that we'll present to the RTM, and then after that, they can review the entire document. Is that correct, or was that not what we had said last time?
I think that was the general idea, which is to boil it down. I guess there's the question of what's the happy median between too little or too much. I mean, you want to make sure that people understand what you're talking about with a strategy. So, but I think the idea would be to do it in as few pages as possible.
Let me interject that I think that Nina and Janice and maybe Gwen, their comments I'm particularly interested in because they're new to, the rest of us have been sort of living with the document for 6 years or something, because we did the prior one. And to have people come in fresh is, I think, very helpful, because we get a different perspective from your comments than we would from those of us who have been working with this for a number of years.
I have a
So
question.
Yep.
Would the new people identify themselves when they make a statement? Because I don't know who they are. I know their names, but I don't have a name and a face.
Can you see, Gretchen?
I can see, yeah, but I
Okay.
don't have the names.
Okay.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the goals for a second, because I can't quite pick it out, Glenn, from your pages, but Bob had 2 of them. Getting the first moratorium, basically, and then providing a broader range of housing options. And you've got at least the housing options there.
I think Bob's is much more targeted and focused. So I think it's got 2 goals. Number 1 is accumulate enough housing unit equivalent points to get a moratorium over the next 5 years. So the town's better able to plan where and what types of housing are developed. And then the second goal is provide a broadened range of housing options and potential locations to address the growing housing needs of town residents. So I think focused, direct, ties into what we've been talking about. I think it's great.
So what do other folks say?
Hi, Janice Bulabasis here.
Yeah.
So, the two main goals, I so agree with. I think the moratorium is really important, particularly in light of the recent Castle Avenue that passed. I just think the moratorium, so that we could have some control in our town on what's going on, I think it's really important. But I also think that a variety of housing, because I think the housing for seniors, I think is so important. I think housing for families. I know Joanne brought up a point about not just having it be a building, having it be something with a courtyard. So I think a variety of housing is really important. So I like the 2 main goals. I like the executive summary, because I think that somebody who wants to read quickly and just get like a background what we're about, I think it really it spells it out. I mean, even for myself, it helped me to understand a lot of background.
Thank
Great.
you. Anybody else? So let me say that, I've been kind of wrestling with the moratorium as a goal, that as a housing advocate, I don't see the moratorium necessarily as a goal, but it kind of flows out of the other stuff that we're doing. However, until we get the moratorium, our planning of where and what gets produced in town is overshadowed by the 830G. And so I'm feeling stronger about that. Really needs to be stated as a goal, because we need to be able to control housing options within the town. And until we get the moratorium in place, we don't have total control. So my personal feelings.
Steve, I agree with you. I think that it's not so much that it should be a goal, but I think it has to become a side goal just in terms of control. I just feel something like a 43 unit complex on such a small parcel. I just wish we had more control.
I think it's okay for it to be a goal right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we've been talking about this for so long and it just keeps being very elusive. So I think it needs to be a goal. I think the community would react well to that.
Yeah.
And it does give us the opportunity to do better planning,
Yeah.
to work with TP&Z.
So if we had an agreement on the two goals, then the strategies should both focus, or should focus on those two goals. And they should both, all of the strategies that we choose should enable us to achieve our goal. And thank you, Glenn.
So with that in mind, Steve, would there be any reordering of the goals that have been expressed here? Again, if you look at the tier 1 versus tier 2 goals, there are some that obviously have the potential to provide additional housing unit equivalency points, and others that are more about providing different housing options and design criteria and things of that nature. So I'm curious as to whether or not you and other committee members think that we might want to look at some of those strategies in tier 1 and tier 2 and move them around a bit in light of that.
Yeah, Mark, I'm scrambling here. On the 26th, you had given us a priority of the votes on strategies
Yep.
from the committee members. And number 1 was amending the zoning regs to increase the affordable set-aside requirement. And that is number 1, tier number 1. I think that is, it's a good strategy and it's a doable one. And I can recall from prior conversations, I think that TP&Z is amenable to talking about it. Yeah. So the second one from the committee members was revising the design residency district regs, which is number 2 there. And number 3 was working with the housing authority to identify property on which to develop housing, which is 3. So those are the top 3 from the committee members' survey. And your question was, are they still the top 3? Should they be reordered? Should something else go into the top 3?
No, my question actually was with regard to below that. And again, I was looking at perhaps Bob's is a little different order or ranking there, but there's a fourth goal that talks about establishing design guidelines for multifamily housing, mixed use developments. And in the next tier below, We're talking about looking at ways in which we can encourage additional existing housing units to be recognized as state affordable housing, so providing some incentives or inducements to do that. But in general, yes, the question is, if this is our goal, how, as now discussed, we're looking more at taking control through getting a moratorium. Does it change in any way our prioritization of the goals?
And let me ask you, would it be helpful to change out what's shown? And so instead of having Glenn's executive summary, we could pop up Bob's?
Yep.
Bob's strategy list is a little bit different.
Let me see if I can find it here.
I think I got it.
Yeah.
Got it? Okay, thank you.
Let me put a page break in here, so, and then turn off
Oh,
the size that people can read comfortably.
um, and so just for the committee's reference, the stuff in black was what Bob had done, and I added some comments in red. And most of those comments have to do with setting numerical targets. And we can talk about that in the next level of discussion.
So I think overall, Bob's top three
Are
are,
the same. Yeah.
we had in tier one, the order is just slightly different. He moved the housing authority up. And then the issue of design guidelines had been recommendation strategy number one in tier two. So I think it works well.
Is there any downside to putting numerical goals in if we don't meet them?
I thought we had them before in the first one, the action plan.
Yeah,
That had, didn't have a lot, but it had a specific, in a few of the goals, it mentioned at least 100 new affordable units. From the housing authority was 12, rehab was 40, deed restricted 20, new units 28. So what do you think would be the downside to have goals listed?
I don't know. That's what I'm asking.
Oh.
I mean, first, and another thing is, are these the same 50 units? Are we talking 50 total units? In other words, is it
Oh.
50 from tier one and then
I just
the
grabbed numbers.
housing authority is another 50, or is it a 50 total, no matter how we get them?
Ignore the 50. That's
Yeah.
just the number I just tossed in there. It could be 10, could be 200.
Okay.
Yeah, the broader question is, should we have numerical goals associated with each of the strategies?
Yes. Because if we have a strategy, there's got to be a reason, and what are we going to accomplish by using that strategy?
We had.
But is the total for all of those 1, 2, and 3 50, or is it 150? I guess that's my question.
I think that those are different for each one of them. And again, 50 is not necessarily the number. It might be 25, 25 and 50, or 10, 50 and 12.
Yeah, okay.
It just 50 is a placeholder for whatever the numerical goal would be, if we agree we should be doing it.
I like the idea of goals. I just want to make sure it's something we can reasonably consider achieving without falling too far behind.
So before we talk about the 50, like under number one, the first comment was increase the percentage from 10 to 15%. Do we want to state that? Or do we want to say 12? Do we want to say 20? I thought there was pretty a lot of support for 15%, just in general.
Yeah.
And Mark, do you feel any different about the 15 versus 12 versus 20?
I think, right now we have a townwide requirement of 10%, but in the TOD overlay district, we're at 12. Arguably it's factually we provide for or allow for more density within the TOD overlay district, so it could support a higher set aside percentage. So I do think there should be some distinction. I don't know if I'd want to limit myself. I think, there's a balance between providing some level of specificity in terms of what you're looking to achieve, but also I think you want to give yourself a little flexibility as well. The circumstances could change. We're in a different interest or could be potentially in a different interest environment as we go up. So, we've had the benefit, or developers have had the benefit of largely free money for the last 10, 20 years, or 10 years at least. So as you move forward, that may change, and that could change the pro formas. And so if the goal is to actually produce some housing units, you could set a percentage that would be too high, that things would no longer be pencil out if things change drastically from that standpoint. So I think, again, this has to be something that would evolve, but I do think there should be a different standard between things in the TOD overlay district, which allows for currently 50 bedrooms per acre, versus the remainder of town, which has density levels far lower than that.
Mark, we need at least 10% affordable to stay even on our percentage of affordable units in town. Correct? I mean, if we add 100 units and 10 of them are affordable, then that's 10%. That helps us towards our goal. If it's 15%, that's better. If it's only 5% affordable, we lose on our percentage trying to get to 10%.
I don't think we're suggesting we go backwards. So
Yeah.
10% is the new baseline here. So
Yeah.
we go up from there.
And so are you suggesting then that it say like from 10-20 or?
Well, I think we had somewhere along the line, we had a reference from 10 to 12% to 15 to 20%. Maybe that was something I threw out there in the survey, but that gives a range of what we're thinking about.
So I like 15 to 20. Do you think that's doable with TP&Z?
Well, again, I think it's a proposal. So there'll be a lot of discussion about whether that's the appropriate limit or not, but we have to set a goal somewhere. So I think that's as good a goal as any.
Well, I like it. It works for me. So Nina, Janice, Gary, Heather.
Janice, I think I like the idea of a specific goal. I'm not, is it due? I don't know TP&Z's position. Do you think that that's realistic?
Achievable.
Okay.
I think it's in the realm of, I don't think it's ridiculous. It's certainly realistic. They may not accept it, but that's their prerogative. But I don't think it's unrealistic at all.
Then I would support I think 15 to 20%, because the goal is to make some headway. 10%, we're staying even.
Yeah, and we'll have an opportunity to sound them out a little
Right.
bit if we have the workshop on the 14th. We're planning to have a workshop, so we can certainly ask them what they think about that as a goal.
This document is a work in progress.
Correct.
So.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
One thing I wanted to add here. So the way it's worded right now, the only thing that makes me a little nervous about it is the planned update of the zoning regulations. I
agree.
haven't seen the schedule, but that could be 2 years out.
I agree.
And so the thought that I think the way I had crafted some wording at one point in our process was that, you know, as an initial effort, in other words, try to get them to do this now or soon.
Yes.
Because every
No,
project,
yeah.
so maybe it's to accelerate or something.
Agree. Take
Well,
out that language.
I think we could just, I think if you just strike the last part of it, so that it's not linked explicitly to the planned update to the zoning regulations, I think as soon as the opportunity presents itself, we can certainly talk to them about this.
I agree. It's good.
And the only other thought that occurred to me that I just wanted to share is that I know that the 50 number, 50 units, was a placeholder. But if 50 units is the increment between 10% and 15%, and the only way you would get to those 50 units is if there were 1,000 units built.
Yeah.
And I think that's significantly more units than have been built in the last, or affordable units that have been built in the last 5 years. So 50 is aggressive.
Yeah.
And just wanted to, so the math right now isn't quite working for me, because I think that that's many more units than we planning and zoning might bucket.
Yeah.
So is it the number of units or the percentage that we're, or both, I suppose, that we're going to advocate?
Well, to me, it's the percentage. And in the back of our mind, maybe not in writing here, but back of our mind, we should be able to equate that percentage into what do we get out of it. And so if we step up the percentage to 15%, do we end up gaining 10 units or 15?
Mark, do you have a sense of how many units we've added over the last 5 years?
Yeah, I mean,
830Gs or inclusionary zoning?
rather than just go off the top of my head, I do have that and I can pull it up. And I think that would form a basis. In addition to that, I think, you know, again, there's some projects in the pipeline that aren't quite, that might present an opportunity for us to reassess this. And so I think if we like the fact that of creating or allowing for numerical goals, maybe I can spend a little time and come back with a recommendation based on those 2 data points.
I think that's fine. For me, anyway, it's fine. So
I think if I can say something, like percentage to me feels a little bit better and more achievable, right? As opposed to like a number. If we're going to build more or whatever, like the percentage can go up as, you know, as the number of developments go up as well, right? So we want to stay consistent in the, you know, 15% or higher, as opposed to an actual number that may be less than 50%, 15%, and might be, you know, depending on what is being built.
So Mark, I'm just looking quickly at your moratorium sheet. And there were, out of the 40 developments, that's 2,000 units. And so if we just said 5% more of that 2,000 was going to be affordable and help us, that'd be 100 units. And so going back to sort of what Glenn had said, I don't think that, you know, 50 is not a number. It's going to be much lower if we're actually going to put in a goal, a number of units we hope to produce. That's kind of- that-
And I think it's just sufficient if we decide a numerical goal is appropriate, I come back with some specific recommendation based on what we just talked about.
And Mark, I think the only thing on that number is that if we're thinking about it as an increment of 5%, then that's 1,000 units. But I think we can also talk about this, that over the next 5 years, this is not the incremental unit, it's the total number of units.
Right, correct.
Yeah, and I think that actually is a clearer thing to express to the commission and to others, is that our goal over the next 5 years, because of the set aside requirement, is going to be, and maybe that number is 50 to 75 units of affordable housing or some other range. So I guess I'll leave that as just double X for now.
Mhm.
It's fine. You want to move on to number 2? That's okay. Number 2 is partnering with the Housing Authority.
I'm not sure what we mean by the verb partner with in this case. What exactly do we mean by that?
Well, I agree with you, especially with Carol being at the Housing Authority. They seem to be doing, they're active. You know, her predecessor was not active, and Carol's been very active, and I don't think that she needs the Housing Authority. I'm sorry, she needs the Affordable Housing Committee. And Mark, I know that you talk with her more often than we do. Does this seem like a strategy that the committee should be focusing on?
I do, and this can take many forms. In fact, the report indicated several areas in which the committee could be helpful, and I think Carol would agree with that. The committee has provided testimony in support of applications before the zoning board involving a housing authority application. I'm thinking of Pine Tree in particular. We've provided recently a soft letter of support from the Housing Trust Fund, which was successful in leveraging a major commitment of state dollars to allow them to purchase the Bureau Street property. And, you know, the town through this body can certainly identify other opportunities either on town-owned parcels or other property that might serve the housing authority, might be appropriate for future residential developments. So I think, you know, all those things, I think Carol would absolutely welcome the Affordable Housing Committee's support and assistance. And we shouldn't underestimate the importance of all those things.
Yeah, I actually like the verb support better than either work or partner. Support the Fairfield Housing Authority.
Well, so on a threshold level, should this be number 2 or should it be 3 or 4?
Well, I think there is the potential within this, and certainly, you know, again, Carol will do. She's a very good at what she does, so she'll do the heavy lifting here. But there is, if you're looking at a goal of producing units, the 2 developments that are being actively pursued by the Housing Authority, there's potential to develop 60, 70 units between the 2 of them. So, you know, the 50 units you've outlined as a goal is certainly doable. And I could see both those projects being completed within the next 5 years.
Borough is one. What's the other one?
High Street.
Yeah, so we have to then recognize that supporting the Housing Authority comes with some potential of neighborhood disagreements.
And, you know, this is Heather, and I want to be very clear here. I'm part of the High Street neighborhood, and I absolutely oppose that development. And I know that conservation, they were denied on conservation, and I believe they also lost the court case. Is there an update to that?
They lost the court case, but the court case basically said that they need to come back to the Inland Wetlands Commission and present alternatives. which I
Okay.
believe they're prepared to do.
Okay.
They've also taken an appeal of that decision too. So they're pursuing two parallel paths. Planning and zoning did approve it.
Yes,
Under
they did. Yes.
800G. So I think they could cure the inland wetlands issue. Hopefully they can do so in a way that, addresses any concerns with regard to impact to wetlands or flooding or drainage or other issues that the commission is concerned about. But I do see that potentially going ahead in the next couple of years with an application before the commission. I just see that, they may change the scope of the project.
Right.
Make it so that might make things a little bit better from the neighborhood perspective. Instead of 40 units, maybe it's something less than that. But I do think the project in the next 5 years is likely to happen. I mean, that's just my assessment.
Oh, I agree with you. I think the project's going to happen. And I will tell you, the majority of the neighborhood thinks of that as well. It's just that the scope of the project is just so massive for such a narrow parcel of land. And I recognize that this is not the forum to have this conversation. So I don't want to hijack the call, but I thought there might have been an update that I wasn't aware of, because there is a lot of concern.
Yeah, I don't think there is anything new or different with regard to that.
Okay, thank you.
And Mark, the support that we would give is not a blanket support.
No,
for
we would have,
everything.
the committee would have to address those issues. And if the majority of the committee felt it was appropriate, then we would support them. But
yeah,
there are other things that we can do. We can certainly identify other parcels, either town owned or other properties in town that might be appropriate for residential development, work with the housing authorities, financing, and do all that. So.
Yeah. Okay, well, circling back then, is this a number 2 goal strategy, or is it 3 or 4?
No, I like number 2. I like number
Okay.
2.
Okay,
We get the most bang for our buck, whatever
Yeah.
work they do. It's,
yeah, and that's an important point, that because if the housing authority does it, it's going to be more affordable,
right.
50, 70, 80%, 100% affordable. So, okay. Number 3.
Do we have a sense of a number here?
You can keep 50 as a placeholder,
Yeah.
I suppose.
Yeah, Borough is 48,
28 or 30.
28, and
Yeah.
High Street is 48.
So let's say that gets trimmed down from 40 to 30. We would still be at 60. So we would be over the goal. So that would be okay.
Yeah. Okay, good. So number 3. Actively engage TPC to review and amend design residence district to increase the number of affordable units and where appropriate, increase housing density options. Glenn or Mark, can you decode that?
Well, I think some of this goes back to what was actually in the larger report, and there were some examples of ways in which the DRD regulation could be amended to provide for this. That's kind of the overarching theme, which is different additional options, additional density where appropriate. So I think that Bob's attempt here is to capture some of that. Is that your thought, Glenn, looking at it?
Yeah, I think in the full report, which I know you don't have in front of you at the moment, but pages 16 and 17 in the full report talked about this, and the challenges in the DRD district right now are enumerated here. And they include the minimum parcel size requirement is quite large and discourages the ability to create developments. In some situations, the maximum density that's permitted is actually the same as the existing zoning. So there's really no density bonus for a DRD. There is no requirement that the developer provide affordable units. It's a density bonus. It's an attractive bonus. It's 50%. if you provide 20% affordable units. But that could be modified to a requirement to provide 10% of the units or, and then an incentive above that. Right now, the regulations are set up that it limits the density of units. So a developer's approach is to build bigger units to get the most money out of them. But in fact, if it had actually transitioned to an FAR type regulation and we cared about building bulk, there might be an incentive for a developer to build smaller units, which would meet the needs of elderly and downsizers and others. So the focus on density rather than, for example, bulk or FAR. So there's a couple of other ones in here and they're kind of enumerated there, but I think the whole idea here is to review and amend
Right.
as they see appropriate. We're not telling them what to do. There were changes made, gosh, was it 30 years ago, Mark, or something? It's quite a while ago on the DRD, which basically stopped some of the developments that people say are really kind of cute and attractive in town. And so can we make this a more effective tool for both housing diversity and housing affordability?
Yeah, that's the thrust of this. We didn't want to be overly prescriptive. We wanted to provide a couple of different options of ways in which the commission could revisit this. But again, the original impetus behind this or thrust behind it was to revisit these regs, which served the town well some time ago and actually created a number of, I think a lot of people would look at and say they're relatively attractive condominium developments at the time that are dotted throughout the community. But at some point the commission decided to pull back on that. They didn't want to pursue that kind of development as a result. So that kind of activity has stopped. So we've been looking for an option to provide developers with an option to create units, but not at the density of an 830G. So this was the original thinking behind it, to give an alternative that actually works.
So the way it reads now, review and amend the regulations to increase the number of affordable units. The change in the regulations would allow an increase in density. Is density the key word that's missing in this? Or is it allowing smaller lots?
It could be a combination of things, Steve. I think it could be smaller parcels. I think, I think as the RAAA, the minimum parcel size is 32 acre or 30 acres. So, I mean, there's really sort of no parcels like that are really available for even considering this type of option. So there might be ways with smaller parcel sizes or modified requirements to make the opportunity for smaller developments, smaller projects that would fit into a neighborhood. And some of those units could be affordable or just provide other types of housing options. So,
So I'm having problem sort of understanding what we would be asking TPZ to do. And maybe it's just me, but this seems vague. You know?
It is really spelled out, a series of options spelled out in the full draft report on page 17 in particular. And again, I really think that we're trying to avoid being overly prescriptive. We want to give the commission some flexibility to address this, but really the whole point is to make something that is workable. The current DRD regulations are not workable. They do not produce housing units. They don't produce any affordable housing units. They don't provide an alternative for developers to do residential development at a scale that's appropriate. Consequently, we see people doing 830G developments in places that really shouldn't be, they shouldn't be there in the first place. So I think maybe this is an area where we don't want to be as specific. We want to give the commission some latitude to revisit this issue and fix it, because it needs to be fixed.
Yep. Okay, I'm okay with that. Hopefully the other members are as well. Do we get a numerical goal?
Whew.
You want to come back to us with that, Mark, or you want to put 50 in there?
I think I'd like to come back to you with that after I talk to our friends over in planning and zoning.
Okay.
And again, we probably will get a good read from the commission, whether they think this is a doable, something they'd like to focus on as
Yeah.
part of our workshop.
And I think the only thing we haven't really said in here is time, like,
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
but I think we
And
can
so-
broach that with them in March and then see what their reaction is. And then they might say, sure, we'll work with our consultant to do this in the first 6 months. Because
Yeah,
these could happen
timing
in,
is really important. You know, in the last one, the action plan had dates. And I thought that was great. I don't, you know, it gave 2018, 2015, 2024. I don't know if the dates are going to go in here or in the full plan, but I like the idea of dates or timeframes. So before
Mark,
we
I
go
think
to number 4,
it would make sense to share this with Jim and Emmeline, et cetera, get their feedback. Because I
Oh,
think
yeah.
the thing here on the design residence is that this is a twofer in the sense that we can also provide other housing opportunities. Naturally occurring affordable housing and other things like that, not necessarily deed restricted, but actually our goal would also be the deed restricted. So I put down here sort of two goals. One is just new units. And the other one is new affordable units.
So number 4 is really a combination of 2 strategies that Glenn had talked about, which guiding the design and guiding the location. And so I don't know if we need to specify them separately.
I
Location.
think the larger report contains some information on this, Steve, so I think it'll when people go to the full report, this will, I think, become clear for them.
And this is multifamily, not the quote missing middle kind of developments. That was a question, Glenn.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking about it, Steve. I think
I think that's down in the next grouping of goals or strategies, rather, number 3 under 4.2.
yeah, let me, I'm gonna pull a mark here and say, let me think about exactly how to word that, because I think the issue is there could be some different layers of locational guidelines in terms of, you know, based on density or services or transportation or sort of other considerations here. So it could include middle housing at some time in the future.
So now, can you scroll back up just a second?
Of course.
So if you look at the 4 strategies, tier 1 strategies, one of them is the housing authority and 3 of them are TPZ. And does it help us then to realign these 4 so that number 1 says engage TPZ in A, B, and C, and number 2 says engage the housing authority? This is a question, because if 3 of the strategies are specific to TP and Z, should they be noted together? That's all.
My observation, for what it's worth, is if you're going to put a timeline and numerical goals to it, then I think they probably deserve to have a separate, separately enumerated goal.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's that unusual. A lot of, it's a lot of what we do has land use implications. If you're looking at where and how things get developed, you're dealing with planning and zoning.
Yep. I'm just asking the question. Okay. So we didn't talk about number 4. We didn't talk it through. I like the concept. If the rest of the committee members have anything to say about number 4. I should also ask Bob and Herb if they wanted to jump in. And if so, just let us know.
Herb's put some comments in the chat, so I'm trying to follow those as well.
To me, the design, if we can incorporate it, is just so helpful, so critically important. People's perceptions of what gets built changes when they see it, if it looks attractive. And to me, that's, if we could do anything, I'd love to see that get done. So, and Herb, I see you're off of mute. Did you want to say something?
No, I think the way we're drafting this is pretty consistent with what Bob and I had in mind in terms of what we saw as the priorities.
Yeah.
But I think that the reference that Glenn made to middle housing, I think, was an important consideration, and perhaps that should be worked in as well in number 4.
Even though it's down below at number 4.2, it's number 3.
Well, I guess I would just, throw open the issue in terms of what do we think the greatest potential is from various sources of additional housing when you consider multifamily, when you consider mixed use, when you consider middle. And maybe that should help to drive the decision whether to keep middle housing as an important, although not highest important goal, or whether it should somehow be integrated with the others.
And Mark, do you have a feel for that?
Oh, again, this is a concept that I don't think we've really spent too much time flushing out. I mean, in terms of how we would go about doing that, there's some different options outlined in the report, but it seems like there's more work to be done. I think it's aspirational. I think it's something that should be in the report, but again, this is pretty consistent with your ranking of the goals. And maybe that reflects the fact that we needed to do a little more work to understand better how we would go about creating more opportunities for middle housing. But, I think if the opportunity does present itself, the fact that it's in a report, as we've done with the 2014 plan, when there was an opportunity to address ADUs or other things, it wasn't correct in the proper sequence, we did that. So I don't know if we should get overly fixated on, is it a tier 2 strategy or a tier 1 strategy, and within that, whether it's third or second or first, but does it belong in our top things that we want to work on? So I think is there something that's missing too? That would be a broader question.
So I'm a little nervous with the concept of middle housing because I like the idea. And I think if it's done correctly, it does broaden options and gives us the opportunity to create a few more affordable units. I will note that there are some others on the outside, some advocates who have a different, I think, definition of the missing middle. And I'm just nervous with a broader definition, that's all. So
one of your committee members is an expert on this concept.
Carrie, anything to say?
You want me to talk about missing middle? I think it can work very well in the right location. And as I review in my mind what the right locations are, I always come up with the old Post Road Historic District, and I say to myself, that's not going to happen. And you know, I mean, maybe it could at some point, or some of the side streets off there. It works better in a downtown location, I think. And you know, again, where there's sewer systems existing, it doesn't work quite as well in very hilly wetlands locations. It's really an urban form, and that's where I'd like to see it. And we can, there are places it can work, meaning other things go away. You know, I mean, these are not undeveloped lots that we're looking at, they're developed lots. And can some of the smaller single family homes be replaced by some missing middle components? Yes, and we already have duplex zoning in a lot of those places. So I think that's a quick introduction to what I would say, I think.
Yeah, I keep thinking of Pomander Walk up on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. It's just a gorgeous little pocket neighborhood surrounded by, you know, big buildings.
Yeah, I think we're all saying that Mark's probably on point, and as long as we're indicating it's an important consideration, maybe not the highest of our goals, but an important consideration. As opportunities present themselves, we can jump on them.
Yeah. Okay, so Glenn, you changed number 4 a little bit.
I did. I think I took out missing middle, figuring that that's probably it's down here. It's probably going to be a conversation that's going to occur as part of the POCD. But I just added in another housing options, which could include, you know, different options or flavors. That design guidelines are important. Also made a note in the full report that the legislature established the Connecticut Commission on Development and Future, or something like that. And they're in the process of working on design guidelines and a pattern book type of arrangement for Connecticut.
Good.
And it's possible that that might provide some additional assistance here on this effort. So I think we might have this one sort of framed out and can move ahead with it.
One other suggestion before we leave this, instead of establish, maybe we want to use strengthen, because there are existing design guidelines. They perhaps aren't as strong as they should be. Certainly.
Does it apply to housing?
Yes.
Whose design guidelines? We have them in our.
Yeah, we could have establish or strengthen, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
Because it's not universal, right?
Okay. That goal in red seems a little, I don't know if it's out of place or wimpy or we can deal with that later. So we move on to tier 2. And if so, before we do that, then let's get an agreement that the 4 we just went over are the top 4 strategies that we all agree. 3 of them working with TP&Z, 1 with the Housing Authority. And so we all agree. So then let's move down then to the second tier. And this means to increase the term from 40 years to longer. Is that correct? And we already have it in a portion of the regulations. I'm correct, Mark? That in a portion it says life of the development or something?
Yeah, there's a provision in our TOD regs that says life of development, but not less than 40 years.
Yeah. And has anything been built under those regs?
Yes,
Um, Good. So it's sort of been accepted by the fact that things have been built under those regs.
yes. In fact, well, it was actually, I think, the applicant's language that the only thing we added was not less than 40 years to make sure that we got 40-year credit, because I don't think if it didn't reference that, the state may not count it, so.
Good. And was that the Knights of Columbus housing?
Definitely Trademark and Alto Fairfield are within that.
Okay, good. And so is there a reason why we don't have a term stated?
There are a couple of options in the full report. One was to increase the number, as Mark described, to say life of the structure or 40 years, whichever is longer. And there was another option discussed, which was the concept of an automatic renewal at the end of 40 years, unless the deed restriction is bought out.
Mhm.
And that was an escape valve that there may come a point in time that perhaps maintenance is foregone, the unit structure isn't optimal, and the town might go through an analysis as to whether or not the units are meeting their needs, and maybe there's a way to get money into the housing trust fund and sort of move on. I'm not sure. Or you just keep them renewing every 40 years. So, I think this is an area that is being explored by a number of municipalities as to how do we try to retain units for as long as we can. So I think there'll be evolution on this over the next 5 or 10 years or so.
So for clarity's sake, can we add something like to increase the term of the affordable housing set aside requirements to beyond 40 years? I just think we got to put it in context some way. Thank you. That's a very good context. I like it. So I like the language of that number 1. I'm not sure that it should be number 1 in the second tier. Housing options, identify property in which for design guidelines, increase, nope. Yeah. It wasn't in the top 6 from the committee members. So committee members, how do you feel? Is that your number 5? Or is that 6 or 7 or 10?
Are you saying move number 1 lower?
That's what I just did. I should put it back. I apologize.
Yes. Should it be number 1 or should it be number 2 or number 3? So I will say for me, it's a good spot where it's at.
Yeah, I don't know if it we need to, again, fixate too much on whether it's number 5 or number 6. I do think if you wanted to harken back to your overall goal of looking at strategies that might help you get to a moratorium, arguably this doesn't do a whole lot to move the needle. It does keep those units affordable for perhaps longer than the state minimum, which is always helpful. So you're not constantly losing ground. The one below it, has the potential, but again, it's, there are a couple different options that we talked about there, but I don't think it matters a great deal if it's number 5 or number 6.
I agree, because they're all within tier 2.
So then let's touch on the other 2. Expand ways to deed restrict additional existing housing units. And Mark, that goes beyond Operation Hope.
Yes, there are a couple options here. One is we have programs already where we incentivize investor-owned properties, landlords to deed restrict properties in exchange for some financing to keep to maintain the quality of the housing stock. So it's a nice win-win. We typically, because the amount of money we're putting into a deal is relatively modest, we're not able to get a 40-year restriction. So it doesn't provide points, but it does maintain the quality of our housing stock and does provide affordable units in town, albeit for a period that's usually less than 40 years. But there's also been some conversation about ways in which we might be able to incentivize property owners, either through, again, some kind of financial inducement or a tax credit or tax abatement, such that they might be willing to deed restrict the property for at least 40 years, such that we would get housing unit equivalency points. So clearly, nonprofit housing providers like Operation Hope might be more inclined to do that. But I don't think our existing ordinance, which does lay out an option for the town to provide tax abatements in exchange for the creation of affordable units, it's not restricted solely to nonprofit housing providers like Operation Hope or Sullivan McKinney. So it could be a vehicle by which we could do that. So I think it does have some potential. I think it's rather modest, but I think it's something that we should include in there.
Okay.
And the important thing here is you're trying to better utilize your existing housing stock. So of all the strategies, this doesn't really involve new housing construction.
I like that better.
All right, we talked a little bit about number 3, about the missing middle. Are there other points about this that the committee would like to discuss? Identify ways to allow more types of housing in more areas? Okay. I'll take that as being fully discussed.
Okay.
Supporting actions. And Glenn, you called them, I think, other strategies.
Yeah, I like this. I think this.
I like this language, yeah.
Yeah. Yep. So that number 1, the town approved administrator, does that mean, Mark, getting somebody else within your department? Or is it something totally separate?
Yeah, I think this is a different concept. Although maybe there was a discussion about whether or not the town should require an approved administrator. Right now, when developers file affordability plans, there's no vetting or criteria for who those managers, who's responsible for overseeing those particular units. And I think Glenn had suggested some other communities go through a process whereby they evaluate, make sure, or vet those administrators so that they're capable of actually overseeing. And there is, to that point, there is quite a range. That some property managers are quite good. They understand the requirements of the program, and others not so much. So I get, I get where this is coming from.
But again, would that be a person within your department or someone at
necessarily.
TP&Z? Or
No, I think it, and correct me if I'm wrong, Glenn, my understanding of this is that it's a third party. It could be the housing authority. It could certainly be a staff position, but it doesn't have to be. It could be.
Yeah, I mean, I
contract
think
vendor.
I think that's fair, Mark. I mean, there's some very qualified developer builder types out there. I know that, groups, for example, Garden Homes. Garden Homes has multiple properties around the state. Their accounting staff and others are qualified to do this. I think the key criteria here is the administrator should be qualified, capable, and experienced at doing this type of stuff. So if it's a builder who's never sort of done one of these before, then perhaps the housing authority could do this in terms of qualifying income. They know what to look for. They know what forms to get. They know how to make sure that the people are eligible. They know how to go through the math for document the rental rate or the sales price. They put the parties together, and then once a year they can check back in to make sure that everything is still, on the up and up. So it doesn't have to be third party, although there are some situations in other communities where they've decided to do that. But I think just a qualified administrator is the key element here. And the town, be it planning and zoning, for example, should approve it. So let's say, for example, let's just say Garden Homes. Yes, you guys are qualified. You are the approved administrators and you are required to submit annual reports. They go ahead and sell their portfolio to somebody else who picks up the unit who really doesn't have experience doing it. And the issue is, whoa, hang on a second here. You're not qualified as an administrator. So it's a little deep in the weeds on this, but it's critical. Number of units been lost around the state because of poor administration, either intentional or unintentional. And I just think we want to keep these units and make sure they stay affordable.
so maybe I'm misreading this. Is this saying that each development that has an affordable housing plan must have an administrator that's approved by the town?
Yes.
Okay, fine. And who does the approval?
Well, currently it would be planning and zoning.
So somebody over there, Jim or Emmeline, would look at
Well,
the
the
plan.
commission when they approved the affordability plan.
Okay. No, yeah.
It's
I think it's a good idea.
I think the language in the report on page 24, I would agree with. I think that language captures the essence of what we're talking about here. It's not a huge issue right now, but you can see there are a couple developments where I spent a lot of time working through issues with them.
Yeah, I mean, there's been tweaks on most of the plans that come through, and so I like the idea. Yeah.
And I think number 2 is a good idea too. We should review this. We have certainly some experience now. There's been some issues along the way that I think, we can tighten up the language to make sure that we're getting what we expect. So I think that should be in there as well.
Number 3's definitely got to be there somewhere. Why not higher? And we'll talk about, I guess, the existing uses of the fund in a few minutes. I should just note it's 8:20, and so I don't want to get lost. Don't want the time to get lost. So this one, 4.3, number 3, is the last of the executive summary. At least the way that it was, that Bob did it. So I'm happy with the 2-pager without pictures and notes in the sideline and stuff. How does everybody else feel? I want a document that people are actually going to read.
If we had room, I'd add pictures. We don't know how it's going to turn out yet, but I think if we can keep it 2 pages with or without pictures, that would be great. But if there's room, we should throw in something, I think.
Yep. So I think text, I think the text feels like it's more than 1 page now. So I think we'll breathe it out a little bit. I think we have the opportunity to add some pictures in. I do think Fairfield has a good inventory of different types of housing. We put 3 pictures on the front, if you will, of inclusionary housing authority and CDBG funding. Maybe there's some additional pictures we'll put on the side that, people don't, they're sometimes surprised when they look at a development and say, oh, okay, I get it now. So I'll work to make that happen.
Regarding the pictures,
Yep.
you might have heard this from somebody else, but the housing authority picture I don't like. You should have a picture of Pine Tree.
Okay.
And the inclusionary zoning picture, I refuse to have Westway. I refuse to give them any kind of credit because I think that developer is just not the right guy.
I agree with Steve on that one. Not the
All
right
right.
development.
So replace both of those.
I can get you other better photos for sure.
Got it. Thank you. And I think I've got enough information now to work from this back to the full document and bring that into alignment. And then I think at that point in time, I would share it back so that, do we want to?
We talk about the processing timeline because
Yep.
trying to find your.
Do you have
sheet.
that sheet, Glenn?
I do. It's not going to work though. I'm looking at it on my screen and I realized I didn't share screen, so apologize for that. That'll make a big difference.
There you go.
Okay.
So at this point in time, we've been Mark and I were looking around at the overall schedule. We have to be, according to the state guidelines, be done by June 1. We looked at the sort of normal meeting schedule for the Affordable Housing Committee, and we thought it likely that we could have a public hearing on May 11th. We worked back 35 days, which means this is the date it's got to be posted on the internet website of the municipality. March 30th is then the date that we would have a meeting to finalize the content so that it can be done and ready to be posted 35 days in advance. So the general thought process is we would meet tonight. We've gotten great feedback here on the executive summary and the full document. I can make those changes. These blue dates are dates that I'm out of town. Get it so that it can be shared with the Affordable Housing Committee and with TPZ. Have a joint meeting on the 14th to get comments and feedback. We would get together later that week, or got it down here for March 30th to talk about what we heard and additional changes to the document. And based on what we've heard, I might craft things in this time frame so that we're ready on March 30th. So that's the general configuration here. How does that feel?
Reasonable.
Looks good.
Well, the 9th, it gives us gives us like 6 or 7 weeks to finalize the document. All right.
Well, I think my sense, Steve, is that roughly a week from now, let's say on the 16th or so, I would expect to have the executive summary done and the full document done. I could share that with Mark. And then sometime in this time frame, could that then be shared if you guys want to get together while I'm away or whatever?
Yeah, we have a regular meeting scheduled for the 9th
Yep.
of March. That's our regular meeting, monthly meeting. So we
But
could
you-
certainly have a further conversation as a prelude to the
Yep.
workshop on the 14th.
And then I can work with you, Mark, after the TPZ joint
Right.
meeting to make or collect comments, identify, questions, concerns or whatever. So we're ready on the 30th to do that.
Okay.
And then as we get towards the end of the schedule, we have probably 2 opportunities sandwiched around the 11th to talk to the Board of Selectmen who tasked us with the update to the affordable housing plan. So we could potentially meet with them during the first week of May as their regular meeting and provide information heading into the public hearing, and then follow up with them at their second meeting in May for acceptance of the report.
And I'm sorry, Mark, was that the RTM or the Board of Selectmen?
Board of Selectmen.
And so nowhere in here is there a meeting scheduled for the RTM?
That would prove extraordinarily difficult, and the RTM did not task us with the assignment of updating the plan. The executive board did, which is the same process we followed in 2014.
Fine. Thank you.
So this is a quick aside then, Mark. Right now in the full document, I put together an acknowledgements page, and I did include the RTM because I think we had included them last time. So is it your recommendation that we leave those names in, or if we're not going to go talk to them or whatever, take them out?
I don't have a strong feeling either way. I don't think we would exclude them from the process. I'm just not sure that we can work through their regular meeting schedule to do that in the time frame that you're talking about.
Yep. So I'll leave them in for now, and then we'll decide what to do later.
By all means, we should do outreach to every town board and commission and get their feedback on the plan prior to adoption. So that's not, it's just, I don't know if we'd have the time to actually formally meet with them as a body.
Okay.
I know what I need to do. Back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So next up then, Mark, old business updates. The moratorium status report and the proposed 830G developments.
Yeah, I didn't spend a lot of time. I didn't certainly send this out to you, but this is currently where we're at. I don't know if, can you see that?
Yeah, not the very top, but we can see the
Okay.
rest of it.
Oh, there it is. There, now it's scrolling. So in terms of changes from the last go round, 528 Blackrock Turnpike, they had formed the foundation walls. They actually have filed for a full building permit. So we would expect that construction to go forward, but probably not be completed in 2022. We're looking more at 2023. As was referenced earlier, 83 Castle Avenue was the set aside development that was approved at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. We have another, unfortunately, another set aside application pending for 26 Beacon Square. It was withdrawn and has been refiled, likely a March public hearing date. I'll keep you posted as to the actual date of that public hearing. And then with respect to 4185 Blackrock Turnpike, you may know this as the plant factory site across from the Motel Hi-Ho. It was originally approved for a 25,000 square foot medical office building, which was, I think, 2 or 3 stories. Subsequently, it was submitted and approved as a 94 unit set aside development. That action was appealed by, I believe, the Mayor Conservancy, and that appeal is pending. And we have word, though not confirmed, that the owner of the property may be interested in revisiting the original approval for medical office use for that site. So, what happened previously was there was medical office use approved. There wasn't a tenant, despite extensive marketing. The original tenant pulled out, and then led to the application for residential development, which was approved. But now there's a new tenant back in the mix. So the developer is looking at revisiting the original approval. So that is, depending on how you look at it, positive news, or certainly a change in the status with regard to that site. And I think that's with regard to set aside or other affordable housing developments. That is probably all that I can report on tonight, unless there are questions.
The change in the points, the moratorium hasn't changed.
Not really. Again, all this is academic until we actually file an application. As you saw from that report, I've tried to provide a better understanding of the potential range, both the minimum and maximum points associated with that, because there's probably going to be a conversation to be had with the Department of Housing when we file the application. We may think it's worth a certain number of points, and they may have a different opinion. And so it will be helpful for us when we do actually make the application not to be 1 point over the threshold, but have a little bit of a cushion, because I do anticipate that the Department of Housing will disallow some of the points that we think should be associated with these developments. So I've tried to capture that ambiguity in that spreadsheet.
Okay, any questions? Anybody? Okay.
Housing Trust Fund. We added $27,000 this past month. So we're now, as of January 31st, have a balance of $127,946. So, we see permit activity. We do have some rental properties that are contributing some modest income from the Parkview Commons development. Although that's not the long-term plan there. Our plan is to identify a development partner and redevelop that site. So we're moving ahead with both that. I do have in the purchasing department an RFQ, a request for qualifications to identify a development partner for the 244 Greenfield Street, which was approved by the RTM and others, setting aside a small piece of property there to potentially create 2 or 3 duplex units. So we'll hopefully the purchasing agent will sign off on this so that we can put it out. I've talked to a couple developments, nonprofit developers that are interested in submitting qualification statements and concept plans. The idea would then be to pick one based on their ability to perform, and then enter into development agreement with them that would have to be approved by town boards, but that would spell out our respective roles and responsibilities. They would secure the financing to do the construction, secure permits before planning and zoning, and others to do the design and construction. And ultimately, these are we're thinking of them as home ownership units like the other units over there. But the town would own the underlying property, ground lease it for $1 a year. And the individual owners of each duplex, whether it be a common wall agreement, but they would have responsibility for upkeep and maintenance and paying taxes and all that. So that is hopefully moving ahead. I was trying to take my cue from how long that process took. I wanted to see, to me, that was the simpler of the two to articulate our goals. But I do have a draft of an RFQ for the Parkview Commons development. I haven't yet submitted that to our purchasing department, but I will do so given the length of time it takes for them to review things. So that's where we're at.
So if I had somebody that I wanted to look at Greenfield Street, I could have them call you?
Absolutely. Yep.
I think I might have sent you a design that Paul Harris, architect from Westport, put together. But I think he's got potential. He's for profit, but we could always.
We don't mind for profit, nonprofit, doesn't matter.
All right. And I still think we should apply for HTCC funds from the state.
No, it's, when the time comes.
Okay. Anything new on St. Emery's, Beaver Street?
No, I don't know if they've got an LOI, a letter of intent on the property yet. That was the next step based on the state's preliminary commitment of funding for the project. So the idea would be to enter into a contract to purchase the property and then go through the requisite approvals to develop that site. But proposing demoing the existing school building on the property and what was the former convent to create 28 units of low-rise type housing. So I think it would be a good fit for the neighborhood. I'm sure there'll need to be some extensive outreach with some of the abutters to make sure that things that people are concerned about in terms of design and buffering and that type of thing are all taken care of. But that's certainly in the realm of doable from what I can see.
Good, thank you. Then let's say a few words about the Community Development Block Grant Program.
Sure. So, and I'll make sure all of you, if you haven't already received it, get an invite if you would like to participate in our public hearing. The town is a recipient of federal dollars under the Community Development Block Grant Program, which is administered by HUD. We have received those funds for many, many years now. We're an entitlement community, meaning that we don't have to competitively apply each year. We get an allocation from the federal government that we can use to address community needs, including housing. So the overall goal of the program is to benefit persons or areas of low moderate income, to eliminate slums and blight, or to address an urgent need. And urgent need typically in the federal vernacular is something that's kind of a man-made or natural disaster type situation. So it's a fairly narrow definition. I mean, the pandemic certainly qualified, but they provided supplemental funding for that. So most of our projects meet the first criteria, which is to address or provide funding in support of persons or areas of low and moderate income. We do fund a number of programs like our down payment and closing cost assistance for first-time home buyers. We also provide rehab monies both for owner-occupied and non-owner occupied properties to provide both affordable housing as well as maintain the quality of our housing stock. And we provide some handyman assistance to very low income, primarily senior homeowners here in town. So those are all programs that we administer directly through this office with federal dollars. And we also provide funding support to a lot of nonprofits like Operation Hope and Sullivan McKinney and other groups that provide services to those communities. So each year we have to conduct a process by which we identify how we're going to spend the money and have to relate it back to our plans and goals that were identified in our 5-year plan. And we have to do public outreach and do a couple of public hearings. So the first public hearing is in March, and typically a lot of our partnering organizations, whether it's Operation Hope or the Housing Authority or others, will appear and present proposed projects or activities that they're seeking funding, but it's open to the public. So members of the public that may have a particular need or issue or concern can also attend and provide input into this process. And so it goes through that same process in terms of approvals. Ultimately, we produce a plan that gets to the Board of Selectmen and to the RTM for their review and approval, and then we have to submit it to HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And our program year begins, because it's federal, begins on October 1. So we'll be doing this planning process through the better part of May, June, and then we'll write the plan and submit it to HUD by late summer for the beginning of the program year. So that's it in a nutshell. We typically get about $500,000 to $600,000 each year. Sounds like a lot, but it's by the time you meet the requirements, you can spend 20% towards overall program administration, 15% to meet public service needs, which a lot of our nonprofits apply for funding support for their programs. And then the rest we can address other housing, community development needs. So it goes pretty quickly. But again, you're all welcome to attend. I'll make sure that you all have information on the programs that we do provide. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to give me a call.
The meeting's going to be by Zoom, Mark?
Yes, it will. Yeah.
Okay.
What date in March? I don't know if you said it.
Yeah, I was looking for it as I was talking.
Okay. I was like, maybe I wasn't paying attention when you said it. Okay.
I had it here just a minute ago. I don't know where I did with it. So I wrote it down, but I seem to have lost it, but I'll get it out to you all.
Okay.
All right. And is there any way that we, the committee, can help you?
Well, just to help spread the word, I suppose.
Yeah.
Once I give you the date, that would help, right?
Yeah. But every year you get requests for more money than you have to distribute.
Yeah, we're typically oversubscribed.
Excuse me.
But so it's always good. Sometimes we're not able to do it right away, but it's good to put it into the plan.
Mm-hmm.
So when opportunities arise, some projects don't move as quickly as we think they will, and there is a requirement by the federal government that you have to spend a certain amount of your grant each year, otherwise you face potential penalties. You get a warning, but then they start withholding grant funds if you don't spend it quickly enough. So we are always looking for, sometimes just things happen. We're working right now with Sullivan McKinney, who wants to do some work on their facility, and the bidders that they had, they thought they had lined up are no longer interested in doing the work. They can't perform, and so we're back to square one. So it's really a small project. It's basically replacing some handicapped accessible ramps to their facility, But you know, that's an example. Those things happen all the time. And if they can't get this done within our timetable, then we have to slide another project in to move it ahead.
Okay, good. Well, that's all that's on the agenda. I should have started the meeting formally, welcoming Janice and Nina, but also recognizing the two members who had just dropped off, Cindy Smarco and Nancy Lyons, for their, I believe, both were on for 7 or 8 years. Cindy was the vice chair, and they both were integral parts of the committee. And sorry to see them go, but happy for the time that we had them.
We're excited to welcome new members as well.
Yes, you need, as I say, new ideas, new blood, and so we're fortunate that Janice and Nina could join us. So with that.
On that front, Mr. Chairman, if I could ask one more question of especially our new members, I had floated the idea, it's unusual that we have 3 or 4 new members that have, coming on board at the same time. It worked out that way. And I know there's a lot of information to digest. And I was wondering, I had floated the idea of whether or not there'd be interest in having a supplemental meeting. Certainly could open it up to the full committee, but certainly for the new members, if they would like to set aside a time, we could do it either an evening or a Saturday morning. I did that with the Economic Development Commission. We can find a space where we can hopefully meet in person, but spread out. I can go through a few key concepts and terms and answer your questions. But if that would be something you'd be interested in, I would be happy to put something like that together. For economic development, had 5 new members, and the whole board was there, and it was really well received, and it went very well. We spent about 2 hours at Fairfield U, but I could probably find a meeting space, at the museum or elsewhere where we can gather for an hour, hour and a half, whatever your time permits. So if there's interest, let me know, and I'll work with you to figure out a time that works for all of us.
I can speak for myself that I would really be interested in something like that. This is my first time being involved in anything town related or anything like this. So I would really appreciate learning more and understanding some of the concepts here. And I personally would prefer it to be on a weekend, just because I don't know what time I usually get out of work. I have a new job, so it's not as flexible as, the old trusted jobs, because I'm learning and starting anew as well there. So yeah, that's my point of view.
Yeah, we did it on like a Saturday at 10. I brought coffee and stuff, and it was more casual, had a little program, but it certainly gives an opportunity for us to just have a conversation.
Mark, I'm interested as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. Janice?
Absolutely interested.
Okay.
Absolutely. And appreciate. Thank you. Thank you. Saturday works very well for me.
Okay. Well, then
Not too early.
No, I won't. No earlier than 10 o'clock.
All right, I'm in.
But I'll throw out a couple dates, and then we'll see if we can put something together.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, not a problem. And the rest of the committee and other members certainly, or non-members, are certainly invited as well if they would like to attend. Gwen, does would a Saturday morning work for you too?
Hi, Mark. So starting the 21st that week, I'm going to be working on Saturdays.
Okay.
I believe, let me just think about the schedule. Actually, let me just pull up a photograph. 1 second.
I'm just jumping in. Pretty much any Saturday will work, with the exception of this Saturday in March. I think March 12th is
It won't be this Saturday.
All right, this Saturday or March 12th, I won't be available, but pretty much any other Saturday can work.
Okay. I can follow up with you, Gwen, so we can figure out a time. We'll find a time that works for at least
Okay, so
three of you.
Saturdays, it'll be 11 to 5:30 when I'm working, starting
Okay.
the week of the 21st. So
Okay.
if we do this before the 21st, which I don't know if it's possible, I could do Saturday or Sunday.
Okay.
And Sunday's still open.
Okay.
So yes, or if you give me enough time, I could probably schedule it off.
Okay. Well, we'll think about some different options here.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
And I'll reach out. I don't know if Heather had to drop off, I think, because she had
Yeah.
some child care issues, but I'll follow up with her as well. I don't know if, I feel bad because we didn't have like an orientation program for Heather or even Joanne at that point, but usually we have one person come on board and they have time to get acclimated. You guys are just thrown right into the mix.
Well, there was good with all the, with everything you sent, there was, we're getting there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
Getting
feels
some-
just like my new job. Just go in there and start doing stuff.
Right. Yeah, there you go. Anything else, Mr. Chairman?
That is all. If we could
That is
have a
all.
motion to adjourn, we would adjourn.
Second that.
Thank you. So we are adjourned. Thank you all.
Thanks,
Right.
everybody.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Good night.